Thank you for the introduction, Jason. And you mentioned something at the beginning of the session. That ControlUp, for those people who are on the call and who are familiar with ControlUp, they probably know us as a kind of like Citrix monitoring for EUC and VDI tool. And what I'm going to talk about today is definitely that part. But ControlUp over the last year and a half or so has kind of moved from being just about monitoring of VDI and EUC environments to what we now refer to as digital experience management and or digital employee experience management. And DEX, which is the acronym for that, is kind of a new term. There has been, if you listen to the market and if you listen to the analysts, they've been talking about things like DEM, digital experience monitoring, but DEX is really something that got like a great boost as a market over the last year. And if you can click the next slide for me. And this has everything to do, and I worked for Citrix actually for almost 19 years, and so I'm very familiar with the challenges that come with monitoring a user's experience. But over the last years, and the interesting thing is that everybody experienced the same, right? With the lockdowns of working remotely, a lot of organizations maybe already did that for a part of their workers, but obviously the pandemic changed a lot in as far as who is working remotely. And Gene from NVIDIA actually mentioned something just now. He said like, well, we have this very nice new office in the Bay Area or in California, and they're going to open up at some point, but the standard, the kind of go-to working MO is, you work remotely, and when you have to come into the office, then that is where people go into the office. And you see that, companies over the years have invested a lot in making the office kind of the place to be. Right? They, you can go from the Google kind of like slide from one level of the building to the other, but you can think of everything like cafeterias, all the kind of like benefits, a gym at work, all those kind of things, kind of like we're done to kind of like deliver this corporate culture. And if you can click the next slide. Obviously, with people no longer being in the office or being a lot less in the office, what matters to employees to kind of like feel that they're connected with the company has moved from being in a building with all kinds of facilities to actually making sure that, the way I do my work and the way I connect with work works the way I want and works at the times that I want. And this is really where this kind of like digital employee experience. So employee experience as a whole includes a whole bunch of other things like benefits and things like that. But the digital employee experience part in that is becoming a more critical item for companies to keep an eye on. And if you can click the next slide. And if you look at a solution that kind of brings together all these kind of technical aspects of the digital employee experience, we're really talking about three areas. It is about proactively monitoring the resources I need to do or need to be able to do my job. And this goes from SaaS applications to VDI to virtual apps to websites I use to do my job. And this is not only making sure that these applications are available, but it's also that they are available the moment I need them. One thing I learned, and I don't have children, but what I've heard from a lot of people is that their kind of like work day has changed as well, right? Especially when we were in the middle of the pandemic and people, had their children at home doing Zoom school, right? The whole kind of like 9 to 5, if that was ever a thing, but has been changed even more. Right? There's more moments where you kind of, step away from work to do something else or to deal with family and things like that. And, you might make that up, for example, early in the morning or later at night. So making sure that these resources I need to do my job are available is an important element in this. Then obviously, if I'm working, if I'm actually using my applications, no matter if these are delivered through Citrix or the SaaS apps, we need to make sure that if I have an issue with them, that uh, that they are either resolved by themselves through self-healing technologies, or that if I call the help desk or open a ticket, that my issues are resolved really quickly. So remediation in fixing the issues that users might have is very important. And the third part is, of course, that we keep an eye on the kind of like overall kind of experience of the users. This is there's a technology element in here, but really kind of like using historical data to ensure that this work environment for me keeps on getting better, or at least doesn't degrade into something worse, right? So if I see that there are certain issues, either caused by my infrastructure or by home networks or things like that, that these things are not going to happen again. So these are the three areas where ControlUp focuses on. Next, Caroline. So ControlUp optimizes the digital experience, and it's really focused on helping you drive employee engagement, improve employee satisfaction, and eventually also to improve their productivity. Because if something is not working, that's not only going to reduce my employee satisfaction. So if I can't connect to a certain app or a certain desktop, that probably will agitate me. But at that moment, I can also not serve my customers. I can also not properly do my job. So this will also eventually affect the bottom line of being able to actually serve your customers. So it's very important that you keep an eye on this kind of digital experience across all these different aspects. And if you go to the next slide, and you can just build it out if you click it like 4 more times, I think. There we go. So if you look at what we look after, and you heard a lot of different vendors, right? We heard Citrix, and we heard iJoule, and we heard NVIDIA, and these are just the technology vendors. But if you look at this from what are all these different elements that make up the digital experience for a user, then we're talking about, of course, applications. These could be local applications, these could be SaaS applications. You see here in the middle of the screen, virtual workspaces. So this is where the virtual applications, so Citrix virtual apps, and of course VDI come in. But then there's all the underlying infrastructure. A good example of that is NVIDIA. We don't just bring in things from Citrix, for example, like connection information and latency on the protocol, but we also bring in other vendors' kind of metrics into our solution to give this complete end-to-end picture of the digital experience. And that includes, for example, we have some specific integrations where we bring in metrics from NVIDIA Grid and from your NVIDIA cards in this virtualized environment to kind of complete that picture. Then there's, of course, I think DaaS is an interesting thing. We've been talking about DaaS for a long time, as an industry. We definitely seen some, significant movement over the last year, and that was mainly driven by all of a sudden, we had to kind of quickly scale out these kind of like virtual application and virtual desktop infrastructure. And the easiest way to do that was to look at DaaS solutions. So I think there's still, a lot of opportunity there. I think a lot of customers are looking at it. They're not all in on that yet, but of course, DaaS, cloud desktops, is an important part of the future here. And then the last element you see here on the right is the kind of very important work from anywhere experience. So here we're talking about devices that are not necessarily in your visibility, right? If a device is on your physical network, on your network, it's typically relatively easy to kind of like see what's going on there. You have that line of sight from your monitoring solutions, but the moment the user actually brings their desktop or brings their device into their home network, you lose a part of that visibility. So a lot of the things we've been doing last year were focused around expanding that visibility into that home network. And I'll talk about that a little bit more here on the next slides. So if we go to the next one. So before I go into the various solutions we offer. So that, kind of like going back to these kind of first three things I talked about: the proactive monitoring of the resources, the remediation and troubleshooting in real time, and then using kind of historical data to for continuous improvement. You see these here kind of like as rows. And the real-time troubleshooting and remediation part, we do that through three technologies. Real-time DX is probably, if you're familiar with ControlUp, that's probably what you already know, because we've been doing that for 10 years. We just added a DX to the product name there. But that is really about our kind of like monitoring of the virtual apps and virtual desktop infrastructure. Remote DX is a technology we added, it's about like 4 or 5 months ago, that really kind of brings more visibility into the work from home environment of the user. And HDX is a completely new technology which brings real-time monitoring into, or brings it, expands it into the physical endpoint. So where ControlUp traditionally was very focused on kind of like the server side, the virtual desktops and the virtual applications, we actually made an acquisition in December last year of a solution that is now integrated with our product lineup under the name HDX, that does kind of like the things we've always done for the virtualization side. We now also bring in the physical endpoint. So this is for Windows, Mac, Linux, and ITIL devices. We can now actually see what's going on completely on the endpoint, no matter where that endpoint is. Scout Beats, I'll talk about a little bit more in insights. I'll talk about here in a minute. Caroline, if you can proceed to the next slide. And yeah, thank you. You can see that when our kind of real-time monitoring, no matter if it's virtualization or if it's on physical endpoints, there's a lot of elements to it. If you look at, and I was around when Citrix had a product called EdSite, and EdSite was a great product, but the main thing where they were very good at was just collecting data. And no offense to Citrix, I'm still very connected to Citrix, and is that the collection of data is only one part of it. It is not too hard to create an agent or to integrate with APIs, which we of course do, and to bring the data to a central point. But what is much more important is to make that data actionable. And when you look at about making data actionable, it's really with the purpose of being able to troubleshoot and remediate issues for users. So what we've always done, and where we always had an emphasis on, is not just throwing all this data on the screen. Right? We collect over 1,000 metrics. If we would just put it on the screen with 1,000 columns, you probably still don't really know where to start. So we have some technologies, it's called the Virtual Expert, that really help you to kind of like, it takes you by the hand and allows you to kind of like look at the data, and then gives recommendations or suggestions on where the issue actually might be coming from. So root cause analysis and troubleshooting is really easy to do with our technology. Another thing is, of course, remediation. So we bring in a lot of tools and actions that are either kind of built into the product or one of our 350 different scripts we deliver through our community script library to actually fix the issues of the user. And if you can go to the next slide. So the real-time data collection, and I know there's a lot of companies that say real-time, right? Real-time is kind of a buzzword. And what real-time really means varies from vendor to vendor. So when you talk about bringing in real-time data from the virtualization side, we bring in updated data every 3 seconds. So that's near real-time. Some vendors call every 10 minutes real time. I personally don't think that every 10 minutes is real time. You're going to miss a lot of information. So it's very important that, when you look at these things, that you understand how real time, what real time is. And what I just talked about is this guided root cause analysis. So through our virtual expert, bringing in kind of like these tools and really giving you these breadcrumbs to understand, hey, what is causing this issue? And then, of course, the remediation. Now, this is not only what you can do manually, we also have an automation component in our product that you can set up to automatically look at the data coming in and automatically react to that. So instead of kind of like a user calls, I go into the product, I find their issue, I resolve the issue, you kind of let the system look after this and even proactively remediate certain issues before they become a real issue for the user and start impacting productivity. If you can click on next 2 times. Thank you. Remote DX, I mentioned it earlier. So Remote DX is a technology we brought in a little bit earlier in the year, which extends the visibility of this kind of real-time information to where the user is working. So we're actually using a Citrix virtual channel that through a very lightweight extension on the kind of client side. So wherever I'm running the Citrix Workspace app, we bring in some additional metrics, for example, the Wi-Fi strength, the Wi-Fi quality, the ISP latency. So really things that are relevant for that kind of user's home network. This has been great for a lot of our customers because all of a sudden the users kind of started going to their own home networks with other people, homeschooling and Netflix and all those kind of things. So this really gave them a better visibility in, hey, is the issue on my side? Right? So it's the issue on kind of like the internal network, on the Citrix environment, on the NetScalers or anything like that, or is the issue that is causing a degradation in user experience, maybe on the user side. And this really helps them giving the best recommendations and the best resolutions for their users. As I mentioned, EdgeDX is really kind of like expanding this real-time monitoring, not just on the virtualization side, but to physical endpoints, no matter if that's Windows or Mac or Linux. Including even IGIL, so we have even an EdgeDX agent for IGIL devices to really be able to optimize the experience on the physical endpoint. And if you can move to the next, so you can skip this one. There's some screenshots in here, but I wanted to briefly talk about ScoutBees. So ScoutBees, if you move to the next slide, is all about proactive availability monitoring. So ScoutBees is a synthetic transaction monitoring tool. And what it basically does is it tests your resources, both VDI resources, so your Citrix virtual apps and desktops, as well as the underlying infrastructure, as well as network resources. So if you want to continuously test the availability of your SaaS apps, your internal web apps, your network resources, ScoutBees can help you do that. And it basically, that's basically what synthetic transaction monitoring does. It's using robotic tests to continuously kind of connect to a session or connect to a URL or, no matter what, depending on what resource you are testing. It does this on a continuous basis. And if you can click on the next slide. And build this one out. Thank you. And one back. Yeah, thank you. And it collects all that data, and then obviously, it brings in additional data, so we can bring in extra metrics, and we can enrich the data, for example, from the Citrix environment. Which catalogs are these applications a part of? We can bring in information from Storefront and things like that. But it collects these data. Of course, it allows you to do reporting. But more importantly, the alerting is there. So when there is an issue with the availability of an app, you can get either an email alert, or you can integrate this with ServiceNow, or you can use a webhook to get notified that there is a degradation in the availability of the app. It will also provide you, through that enrichment of the test results, with this additional data so that you can better pinpoint the issue. Now, people say to me like, well, you can't really fix Office 365, right? If Office 365 is down, what am I going to do? I'm kind of like dependent on Microsoft, and that's absolutely true. However, knowing that there's an issue and preventing that, 500 of your users immediately start opening help desk tickets because, they can't open their Office 365, knowing it before they do. And we've seen some downtime over the last year with Azure and with Office 365. We knew it immediately. and being able to proactively reach out to your users and tell them, hey, there's currently an issue, find another way to connect to the applications, or use, do something else even, is already half of the battle. So this is not just for VDI, this is also for your SaaS applications. All right, let's go to the last bit here. So if you you can go to the next slide here. Very briefly about insights. So if you click 2 slides here, and then build this one out. So insights is basically our historical data and analytics platform. So we have all this real-time information we collect through real-time DX and remote DX and all those kind of things. And we take a subset of that data and store that into insights. And in this historical data allows you to not only kind of like do things like trend analysis, and we even provide sizing recommendations for VDI. Obviously, it also gives you information about usage and performance in your environment, and really helps you to make better decisions for the future. So not only like, and management always likes the reports, right? What's the availability and things like that. It's important for that, but we also make sure that you understand what the data means so you can make better decisions for tomorrow. All right, so if you can click next one more time. So this is all together. The final thing I want to kind of like rest on, and if you can forward 2 more slides, is this one. Obviously, if you want to see ControlUp, any of the technologies I've talked about in action, of course, talk to one of our partners like Alchemy. Right? They are very knowledgeable about what ControlUp does, how it's implemented. However, if you say like, hey, I just want to see this in my own environment, I don't want to, go into a full project yet. ControlUp, you can easily download it. You go to controlup.com, click on the download free trial button. And when I first started working with ControlUp, I was kind of surprised because I clicked on the button and it actually started downloading the software, which is very unusual. There's no, forms you have to fill out. You can literally download it, launch the console application, and populate your dashboard. So start adding your Citrix environment and all these other like your hypervisors. And literally within 10 minutes, you can be up and running and already start seeing this actionable data I talked about. So obviously, if you want to do a full POC, feel free to bring in your partner Alchemy or bring in ControlUp. We're more than happy to kind of get you up and running. But if you're not ready for that yet, feel free to go to the website and start working on that yourself. All right, and I think these are all the slides I have, and I think I'm kind of on the money with the time. So I did see a question here in the Q&A pane about how does automation work with Agile? It works the same. It depends a little bit on what you do, right? So if it's for the kind of Citrix session, then obviously that happens on the server side. We can do full automation there. We have specific metrics in ControlUp Real-Time DX for Agile devices. Any metrics we collect, so any metric, any of those 1,000, we can kind of like do if this then that with automation, right? So if this is particular Agile metrics, then we can automate on that. With HDX, this is our kind of physical endpoint monitoring tool. We actually taking that to a step further. So if you, for example, want to use kind of like ControlUp as your single pane of glass, we can call the kind of Agile APIs. If you, for example, need to update the Agiles, or you want to do any script, we have, of course, with HDX, we have various Linux scripting languages we support. You will be able to do that. So there's many options with Agile devices to do automation beyond just the monitoring part.
Excellent. Well, Joe, well, thank you very much. I mean, I know that we had touched about, especially with insights, right? Being able to, capture metrics about the machines, whether that's CPU, memory, disk space, IO, all those different pieces that we can capture. Anything that we can gather in that real-time DX, right? Then we can definitely be able to display that through insights as a part of this delivery. So, Joe, we really want to thank you very much for your time today. We truly appreciate the partnership, as we do with all the vendors that presented today. ControlUp, especially you alluded to there, within the last 6 to 12 months here, has made some really good moves here to help broaden that story, which that really enables our customers to get that view of what's going on, regardless of where we're at and what technologies we have to play here. So I really want to thank you very much for today.